there. My name is Kelley Cody Grimm.
And I'm Max Grimm.
And we are Creative Actors Lab. What we want to do is just talk a little bit about how you can bring creativity into your everyday life. Hey everybody, it's Kelley.
And Max.
And welcome back for another podcast. And this one, Max and I wanted to talk about as acting coaches and people who have worked with children in theater and coached them on demo reels and also done summer camps. We wanted to talk about
working with kids in general.
Yeah, working with kids in general, which I love doing. We want to talk about the recent docuseries called Quiet on the Set and the dark side of children's television. And, just again, we wanted to talk a little bit about our experiences, and just if you are a parent listening to this, we are going to be discussing some rather serious subjects. So if you're in the car, you might want to just listen to it when the kids aren't around. I really feel it's important just to talk about what is discussed in the documentary, and then, whether again you have kids in the business or not, trying to help spot someone who is going to be a toxic person, maybe in your life, but then also people that maybe in show business trying to swoop in and tell you, I'm going to take care of everything. You've got nothing to worry about. And then there's a lot of control issues. And we'll talk a little bit about how that happened with Drake Bell. And, just the fact that people did want to speak up and say something. So, and Max actually had read Jeanette McCurdy's book.
I'm glad my mom died.
Yeah. And that's a really tough title for a book.
Oh, I get it. I really do.
She did not name Dan Schneider specifically in her book, but she did call him the creator.
Yeah.
And so then it was just assumed. And at the point, just to kind of give you a little background on the docuseries, when the Me Too movement broke out and brought down Harvey Weinstein and several other people were talking about Dan Schneider and the way things were on his sets. And you have to remember, just to kind of put it in context, and my kids, we were Nickelodeon big time. They were watching SpongeBob and Blue's Clues and, of course, Drake and Josh. And I didn't really watch the Amanda Show that much or all that, but definitely Drake and Josh. iCarly actually gave me the inspiration for doing the OTC comedy troupe. And we actually did a show in the very beginning when people first started doing live web shows. And I got that inspiration from iCarly and went, hey, you know what? We don't have to be in a theater. And so we webcasted from a coffee shop. And there were some nights when we had 14,000 people online watching us, which was a crazy number. What the documentary really does look at is just in the very beginning, as Dan Schneider started to rise to power in Nickelodeon, and really Nickelodeon and somewhat of the Disney Channel, but Nickelodeon pretty much, and you've got different networks now. You've got YouTube, you've got TikTok, Instagram. If you want to program things, you're there. Prior to that, late 80s, I think there were some cable stations and stuff, but you were pretty much looking still at the basic networks, a few key cable stations. So if someone told you you're never going to work in this town again, that was pretty final. And what it did was give license to a lot of these people to abuse their power because they knew, and for other people not to raise questions because they knew, well, what do I do? Particularly because this was LA at that point. There's nowhere else to go if I want to stay in Hollywood. You couple that on top of which you have parents getting their kids into show business. The kids don't have that much experience. The adults don't have that much experience who are their parents. There's a lot of trust issues there. If you don't really know how to navigate it, some people want to put down Nepo babies, But one of the good advantages of being a Nepo baby is, I'm sure, Janet Leigh, especially her experience with Alfred Hitchcock, if she started to see things going not so good for Jamie Lee, she would have spoken up. And also knowing Tony Curtis and Janet Leigh, producers weren't going to try to screw over their daughter. So there were those advantages, but a lot of the people that were coming in and wanting to do auditions and just wanting to be and we even see that now. I was on a set and I saw a mom come in with her two kids, and she decided she was going to set up court. She was up in the front of the green room, or the holding area where the talent was. She decides to move everything. She is going to sit right next to the catering table with her two kids. They're going to sit there, and she just kind of expected the ADs to pick them and have them in every scene. That's not how it works, but that was her expectation. And then when the caterer asked her to move, she was less than happy about that. And then I heard her talking at the end of the day, well, the next time they ask me to come in, I'm going to put decline because my kids barely got used and they've got so much talent. And I'm like, you're the kind of mom, unfortunately, that somebody who's might have some instincts would try to say, oh, well, I could do this for your kid and I could do this for your kid. Hey, trust me, put them in my hands. And you'll do that. And that mom not really having the sense that that could not be a good thing for their kids and just wanting that for their children or for themselves can get them into a lot of trouble. And this even goes back, I mean, you had a lot of child labor laws back to the silent era with Jackie Coogan, who was a child actor with Charlie Chaplin. And his parents kind of took all the money that he made. They took it. Then there was the Jackie Coogan law. Listening to some biographies of Elizabeth Taylor and also Judy Garland. Unfortunately, someone like Louis B. Mayer used to give the child actors uppers and then downers so that they could work a whole lot. Now, compared to now, things are a lot better. But I think what this series really does point out is that on Dan Schneider's sets, there was rampant sexism. There was inappropriate behavior, bullying, and also sexual abuse. In the course of his shows, there were 3 convicted pedophiles. One of them, which was Brian Peck, no relation to Josh Peck, who abused Drake Bell. And, I will tell you, if you have not seen the series and you do want to watch it, do not watch it late at night. If you're going to be like me, you will just get so angry and so wound up. It's going to be very hard. Give yourself like earlier in the day so you have more of a buffer to be able to handle that. Yeah, there's just a lot of things. I'll go into it a little bit more in depth, but did you want to say anything?
Yeah. Look, the whole point of this is it's sexual abuse of children. And all the other stuff is, for as bad as it is, and the exploitation and the manipulation and the fear and the promises that these people make. It's not just within the entertainment industry, although that's what we're focused on here. But the stuff happens. As far as kids being sexually assaulted, to be honest, happened to me, and more than once. Not by my parents, but for as bad as that is, as far as traumatizing as that is, what is worse, in my opinion, is when you try to say something to somebody, and the first thing out of their mouth is, I don't believe it. That hurts worse than to at least it did for me anyway, when I tried to, say something to people around it. And I remember hearing, well, can't you just forget about it? Or, I'll name names here. Barbara Streisand is a freaking idiot, in my opinion. She talked about like a couple of the guys who supposedly Michael Jackson molested, and she said something to the effect of, well, it doesn't matter, they came out okay anyway, or something. And it's like, Barbara, fuck you, you ignorant bitch. How dare you? How dare you? It's pardon my language, but I just don't have, I just can't, I'm not going to sugarcoat anything. But I read Jeanette McCurdy's book, I'm glad my mom died. The title basically, what she's saying with that is her mom's in a lot of pain. Psychologically, her mom is in a lot of pain. She was going through cancer. She was going all this stuff. Basically, when her mom died, she's like, she's not in pain anymore. Good for her. I'm glad she's not in pain. And I've had similar people in my life that when they died, all I could say was, good for them. They're not dealing with all that confusion and anger, and they're just in good. However, while they were alive, it spread to so many other people.
Mm.
And it's what I think is one of the saddest things is, and again, this happened to me, you don't realize that you're having your innocence taken from you. And the reason you don't realize is because you're so innocent. You don't know what's going on. And then it's some time after the fact you go, oh, that's what happened to me. There's so much to say here, and I don't want to, I don't want to go off on tangents, but at the same time, I really don't want to water anything down. I don't want to sugarcoat it. I don't want to be nice about it. I want to be direct. I'll just say this. I remember for myself, you did a play reading, Grandma Gatewood's Walk.
Mm-hmm.
And it was this play written by a young woman who had been assaulted, and this was kind of like her, kind of around that time, and things that were going on and things that happened as a result of her being molested. And this was decades after the fact.
Mm-hmm.
I just remember at some point the young woman's character is describing in detail what happened to her. And at some point or other, I just very calmly thought to myself, oh, that's what happened to me. And then I thought, oh my God, that happened to me. And it was so many years later. It was, and so I started realizing when something happened in my life, why did I respond that way? Why did I behave that way? Why did that make me feel the way it did? And all of a sudden, oh, it's because I was molested.
Mm-hmm.
And it all of a sudden, it made so much sense. In a way, it was very kind of freeing to have that realization. And at the same time, you go, oh my God, what could I, if I were to go back, what would I have done differently? And of course, it's ridiculous to think that because it's not going to happen that way. But
and you were also a child, so yeah.
I worked for a children's theater at one point. I was very successful. It was like a Monday through Friday. We had bus loads of kids coming in every day. It was several hundred kids every day. And the guy who was running the thing started confiding in me about how he found some of the young kids to be very attractive. Yeah, doesn't that just, oh God, that just makes my skin crawl. I mean, it's
yeah.
But here's the thing. This is a guy, and I don't believe, at least not that I ever knew, that he ever acted upon it. But regardless, the guy's putting himself in a situation where he's going to be around several hundred kids Monday to Friday, all the time, and that is just terrifying. That's just terrifying, But when I mean, this can happen to anybody. But when it comes to kids, so many of these kids, they don't have anybody really to advocate for them. And I will say this, and I will really not mention names, but there have been in the course of our time coaching people, that people would come in with their kid, 4 or 5 years old, cute, adorable, funny, all this stuff, and they're seeing that kid literally as payday. And there's one in particular I really like. Her parents and her grandparents were looking to make that Disney money. And whether this kid wanted to do that or not is not the point. So this little kid was going to be put through all of this stuff. And I mean, just, acting's a job. You got to train. You got to go out and hustle. You got to rehearse. You got to work your butt off to do this and really do it right. if you're going to do that, it's got to be your choice. You can't be a little kid who knows nothing from nothing, and your family's going, you're going to do this, and you're going to make all this money, so we're not going to have to, live in a crap box house, and and we're going to be eating, steak and lobster every night, and we're going to pay off our mountains of debt and all this stuff, and they're putting all of this weight on a little kid.
And
How dare you? How dare you?
And I think that that's the family too, but I think the dynamic of where you have a child on a children's show and they know that the adults around them, their livelihoods are dependent on them being able to do the stuff that they do. And, and I think that's where you saw so much of the toxic behavior, because if Dan Schneider was not getting what he needed out of the child actors, they don't have that experience. They're 10, 11, 12 years old. They just probably started a few years ago. They're used to seeing animated shows and things like that. They're not studying Uta Hagen. They're not looking
They've never
Stella Adler or anything like that. They're just going with, hey, this is how we play, and the reactions are going to be big. And that's, also what makes kids shows kind of fun, is the big reactions. But it puts kids in a very vulnerable situation. I've certainly said this to you in the course of our marriage, but, I'm so sorry that happened. I was sexually assaulted in college. I was older, obviously, when that happened, but it happens. And I think when I was 20, and you as a child, the number one thing is you're afraid of not being believed. And people just saying, oh, no, no. And then it's kind of like, well, what's the point? I'm sharing this very horrible thing that happened, and you're not going to believe me.
Well, it was put to me at one point when I was a little kid, and I'm not mentioning the person's name, but it was after a series of, shall we say, bad treatment by this adult on me, little me. I just was incensed. I was like, how dare you do any of this to me? And I said, I'm going to start telling people the way you treat me. And the response was, no one will believe you. Everyone thinks I'm nice. And that, to this day, still infuriates me to think back on that. And there was a thing also in the 1970s. It's about, I forget the philosopher's name exactly, but part of his thing was about pedastry. And basically giving young kids over to adults for their sexual practical education, and what a good thing that is, and we have to free our minds and all this crap. But there were a lot of people, particularly in the 70s, that really believed that, and they really thought if you don't do this for your kid, you're doing them a disservice. It comes back to this. The kid has no idea what it's what you're doing to them. It's like, oh, okay. And then after the fact, it's like, I've talked a lot about in acting how vulnerability can be strength. And as actors, a lot of times we do have to open up the vulnerable part of ourselves in order to make a part work. And so, so for a lot of people coming into this, they have that vulnerability. It's open, and other people want to take advantage of it. And just, there's a special place in hell for people like this. I just, it's incredible to me. But when I was reading Jeanette McCurdy's book, basically, she never really wanted to act. She wanted to be a writer. Her mother wanted to act. So it was sort of like living vicariously through the daughter. And she talked about all kinds of stuff about her mother was like bathing her up until she was 17 years old. Oh yeah, it's just, it's weird. Charming. Yeah. And talking about how, and this really just, I don't even have words, but she said, but saying something to the effect about her mother would, just physically check her over. And then we talked about she would have to check your back butt and your front butt. When at 15, 16, 17 years old. And it's like, I'm just speechless, you know.
Yeah.
But the whole entertainment industry is not this way, and frankly, you run into creeps like this in industries that have nothing to
Oh,
do with this.
you've got faith-based
However,
groups that
but
face this
however,
problem
I
too.
mean, to have something like that happen to you, and then you're kind of in the public eye,
Mm.
and that's something that you either have to put a whole, you just mash it down and forget about that, or when it, when it comes out ultimately, you are going to have to go through that hell, but you're going through it in the public eye, which
And
just compounds the difficulty of going through that situation.
in episode 3 of Quiet on the Set, Drake Bell sits down and talks about
Yeah.
it. And unfortunately, and he's in recovery now and things like that, but he went through, Brian Peck,
Hmm.
just to give you an example. So he they were doing all that, or I think they were both on the Amanda show, and so the two of them were doing comedy variety and having fun and going back and forth. And when they were looking at doing kind of like a buddy comedy thing, someone said, oh, look, Drake and Josh, they'd be perfect together, playing two stepbrothers that are trying to adjust to what's going on. Within that, it was like, yeah, this is a big break. And at that point, Drake Bell's parents had been divorced since he was 5. And his dad really, at the point that Drake had some interest in doing acting, he was the guy that was taking him out on auditions, and, but he was going to school regularly. And then after 3 o'clock, if he wanted to go on an audition, he did that. Absolutely. So he got a chance to be a series regular on the Amanda show, and that was huge. And at that point, you know, his mom was somewhat involved, but really didn't do a lot of that. But this is what people who are narcissists and, people who are destructive will do. They will notice that there's a chaotic family dynamic, and they will want to take advantage of that. His dad, Drake Bell's dad, was sitting there going, this guy, Brian Peck's giving me the heebie jeebies. He's just getting too close to my son. Interestingly enough, there is footage of him with Leonardo DiCaprio as his dialogue coach, and he's, like rubbing his arm and getting too close. And I hope Leonardo DiCaprio didn't experience that, but you're just sitting there going, okay, this isn't normal. But that was Drake Bell saying, yeah, that's very close to what was happening with me. And so his dad was sitting there going, this is just weird. The guy's calling my son directly on his cell phone and things like that. And so he raised that issue, as did another mother, Brian Hearn's mom, when she wasn't comfortable with things, and he was a young Black performer, and she felt like some things that he was doing felt a bit racist.
Hmm.
Like,
Oh yeah.
he's going to be selling, stuff out on the street.
Yeah.
And the poor kid, for one of the, Nickelodeon challenges, they covered him in peanut butter and had dogs lick it off. And
Hmm.
he's like, I don't like this. I don't like this. I'm uncomfortable. But they're like, oh, well, it's funny and it's for all that. But at the point that Josh's or Drake Bell's dad was saying, Brian Peck, I'm not comfortable with him. And what disappoints me is when he reported that to one of the women on the production team, she's like, oh, well, he's gay. And
Hmm.
this is coming off as a bit homophobic. And so then he said, all of a sudden now he's being ostracized on set because he's been told he's homophobic. And then Brian's getting in Drake's head and going, hey, I think your dad's keeping you back, and I don't think he's giving you all the money that he's supposed to. I think there's issues with finances. If I come in here and help you out, then gosh darn, things are just going to get better. And so, Drake didn't know what to do, but he's like, yeah, I have this career. I mean, at this point, he was also doing his music and stuff. So, he was like 15 years old. He said to his mom, I think I want to live with you, and maybe dad's not the guy for me anymore to be able to do that. Which, you could just see in the man's face, his father's face, he's going, that broke my heart. But if this is what he wanted, this is what he wanted. I turned over the books. And so Brian Peck's like going, I will take care of everything. I will manage his career. He's going to be big. The mom, and again, swooping in a situation where, and I can tell you this from personal experience from a boyfriend I had in college, clearly not Max. But yeah, that's how they insinuate themselves into your life. It's like, oh, hey, I'm going to take care of everything and everything. And then what they start to do is they start to pick off relationships that of people that might be going, hey, this isn't all right, this isn't okay. It's like, well, what do they know, baby? I'm the one who knows what's best for you, and didn't I handle this and that? And then they start to try to get you to not be with the family members and people you've always trusted. All of a sudden they're the only one that knows what's good for you, and that's usually how predators or abusers really kind of move in. And that's what he did. So put a wedge between him and his dad with the mom. The mom often lived hours away from where auditions were. Hey, no problem. Guess what? He can stay at my place. And then I'll get up and I'll take him to auditions when he's not doing Drake and Josh. Well, one night he was staying over. He woke up, and without going into too much, he was being sexually assaulted. And it was pretty bad. And then he apologized, and then more and more. And again, you need to see the documentary. But what was interesting was Drake Bell had a girlfriend. And so how Brian Peck apparently got the phone number of the girlfriend. Maybe he just said, hey, if you need to get in touch with me, I'm going to be here. So he was calling, he was blowing up Drake's phone. And this is back when they were flip phones and stuff. And the mom's just sitting there going, he picked it up, and, he's like, I need to talk to Josh. This is, his dialogue coach and his manager. Put it over, and he's like, hey, sorry, I'm just over here, just kind of need to wind down. And the mom immediately knew, the girlfriends, and she's like, Drake, can I talk to you in the kitchen? She's like, what's really going on? And he's like, oh, no, it's fine. And she's like, no, that's not normal. What's going on? And so then he told her what was going on. She told Drake's mom. They were like monitoring the situation. And then at one point he just snapped and started screaming at his mother, and he just let loose with everything that had been happening. At that point, Brian Peck was arrested. And, again, if you watch the documentary, they really lay out all the things that happened. And what I thought was awful was when he went to the court, Drake Bell only had like him, his mom, and one or two other people. And then Brian Peck had the whole side of the court was there supporting him, kind of like what you said with, when those allegations came out about Michael Jackson. It's like, oh no, he couldn't have done that. I know him. I've known him for years. And letters of support from some pretty substantial people within the industry. I think now they're trying to recant that and going, I didn't know the extent of what happened, and he was just a friend, and I couldn't believe this was happening. But he gets sentenced to 16 months in jail. He is a registered sex offender. But interestingly enough, and this is where, background checks, because when you and I have worked in summer camps, I've taught in Out School, which is just an online thing, had to go to a background check. You got a background check. And that just, now background checks don't catch everything unless you've been caught as a sexual predator, because so a basic background check with your social security number or whatever, it'll just say if you've ever been arrested or anything like that. And if you do a level 2 background check with fingerprints, then if you have been arrested or you're a registered sex offender, it'll pick that up. But shortly after he was released, he actually got hired by Disney. And then people heard that, and there was an uproar, and they're like, oh God, we didn't know. And I'm like, how could you not know if you had done a background check? I mean, back when I worked at Children's Film Society in the early 90s, I had to go through a criminal background check every few years. So you would have picked that up if you had done your due diligence. But, it's those things that, if somebody's giving you the heebie-jeebies, they're at a church that I used to go to that I no longer go to. There was a choral director there, and he wanted to be the cool guy with all the kids. And at one point, he sends out an email. Not my kids didn't get it because I think he knew better. It's like, hey, guys, I know how troubling teenage years can be. If you want to hang out at my house and not tell your parents, that's totally cool. And when the parents found that out, that was not okay. He eventually left, and we found out later that he went to China and ended up marrying, or Thailand or something like that, and married like a 17-year-old girl.
Mm-hmm.
And then came back later and said, people should respect love in whatever form it is. And again, heebie-jeebies.
No.
And we were just sitting there, but because this church was a little bit more on like the liberal side, and I am a liberal, fully admit that. There was a sense of, oh no, you've got a trust bin, all that, and I'm like, no, we need to have background checks for anybody that works with children, a level 1 and a level 2.
I mean,
again, I've worked with kids.
Your intuition.
Yeah, I've worked with kids for decades. And that's just, if I don't have an organization asking me to take a background check, I'm going to be very suspicious and probably not want to work with them.
Let me one thing.
Mm-hmm.
If in any situation that you don't feel good about,
Mm-hmm.
whatever it is,
Mm-hmm.
and somebody tells you you have to trust that, no, you don't. That's
Mm-hmm.
no, you don't. If your gut is telling you there's something wrong here, and it's like, well, no, you have to. This whole the words "have to trust." Oh no. Get out right there.
That's a major flag sign. And interestingly enough, like last week we talked about the creative brain.
Mm-hmm.
But your gut instinct is actually your second brain. That is all your senses. And so if it's hitting you in your gut first, and again, the heebie-jeebie factor is really high, you need to make sure that you're not going to do that. But you know what I mean? And the thing with this documentary too, and you saw the first one, but just, I'm like, in the first 15 minutes, you've got Ariana Grande leaning back on a bed, sprinkling water all over herself.
Yeah, it was.
You have her trying to squeeze the juice out of a potato. And I'm like, this is damning enough before I have even heard about all the other things. And then two of the female writers, Christy Stratton and Jenny Kilgin, who worked on the Amanda Show, and there has been that sexism, and you heard about that on like Saturday Night Live. John Belushi would go, "Oh, the women aren't funny. But apparently, the two of them were hired as writers on the Amanda Show, and they were like, "Hey, we're only going to pay you. We're actually going to split a writer's salary between you two ladies." But hey, you get to write on a professional show. And, then they tried to defend it when the woman season 2, when Jenny actually complained. And at that point, Christy Stratton had, after one season, I didn't want to do that. He insisted on back massages for them. At one point, he was like, okay, pitch us the story, but I want you to pretend like you're being sodomized. Yeah. And this is just like, who the hell? I mean... But it's like, oh, but he's a big producer. I can't say anything. And, again, I'm glad for Me Too, because people started to speak up. And I won't go into too much detail, but I really had only told very few people about my sexual assault in college. But then Me Too came around and I blogged about it. And at that point, my blog was getting a few thousand reads. And I was so surprised how many people came out to tell me that things like that had happened to them, and that they were so sorry. But it's so out there, and and I just wanted for us to talk about that, and particularly the case with the sexism. And, then the defense was, oh, well, we don't set the pay range. It's actually, WGA, Writers Guild of America. And it's like, Writers Guild of America would say you pay the women writers the same as your male writers. So there's been a lot of like, oh, gee, if I owe some people, and Dan Schneider, did a YouTube video with one of the actors from the Amanda Show. What people have said is, if Dan Schneider really wants to do an apology tour, he needs to go on some tough journalism, like Dateline, like 60 Minutes, and answer the tough questions, because the person who was talking to him was a friend who had gotten his start on the Amanda Show. So basically his thing was, I'm ashamed of my behavior and I owe some people a pretty big apology. And I'm like, and you may be getting your ass sued and you need to do that.
Let me offer two things here very quickly. Just about the mindset that can tend to surround some of these situations, be it entertainment or what. Two things. First of all, when I was about 15, 16 years old, I was working as a busboy in a restaurant. And we had this slow afternoon shift. That's when I would, go like clean the restrooms and so forth. So anyway, we had this one waitress there. She was this woman from France. And the whole idea of the older people grooming and training the young people in all manner of sexual adventures. Anyway, I am in the restroom and I'm standing at the urinal doing what one does at a urinal, and this woman barges into the men's room, comes up behind me, and starts tickling me as I am standing there with my pants open and urinating. And I think I said something to the effect of keep your goddamn hands to yourself, is what I think I said. And she got all offended, storms out, is all pissed off. I come out of there. At this point, I am breathing fire and nails. I am so mad. And I go up to the manager who had seen this whole thing, and I just let loose. And his response was, don't piss her off. She's a good waitress, is what was said to me. The other thing, when I was in high school, I had a girlfriend we dated for a couple of years. And I got really so fond of her. But they were in this pretty well-to-do family. And she starts telling me she has these three male cousins who are a few years older than her. They apparently the three of them had been sexually molesting her since she was about 6 or 7. And this had been going on, and she started telling me in detail what would happen, and I got so mad. Mm-hmm. And the next time I saw these, one of them in particular, I was just like, I'm gonna rip his head off. I'm gonna rip it off and feed it to him. And so I'm probably 16-ish at this point. I see this guy, and I get all up in his face, and I am going to beat the absolute living crap out of this person, and he's gonna and all this and all that and blah blah blah. And he's like trying to get away from me, and I was like, and just as I start to actually like physically like lay hands on him to basically separate him from his teeth, all of a sudden she starts begging me, going, no, please don't hurt him. And I was like, you're protecting this piece of trash? Really? You're protecting this guy who has been doing this to you for, at that point, like him and his two idiot brothers or whatever they were. This has been happening to you at least once a week for 10 years, and you don't want any harm to come to this person? I'm speechless.
Well,
I'm speechless. Because believe me, I mean, I was prepared at that point to run over him with my car.
Yeah. And my assumption is the parents, nobody knew about it. Right?
Oh, the parents knew.
Oh, they knew. Oh, okay.
The parents knew, but they said, it was, I don't believe you. That's not happening. You need to stop making up stories like this. Da, 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 da. And at that point, I was just like, I have no use for your parents. Yeah. You need to get away. And I heard many years later, when Facebook was still a thing, I found some people that I had gone to school with, and one guy actually grew up down the street from her. And I asked him, it's like, do you know whatever happened to my high school girlfriend? And he said, yeah, she moved out to California and she works in production for like one of the big porn studios. And I went, oh boy. Yeah. And I was like, here's why that bothers me so much. I know what happened to that kid growing up. there's an organization out there called Fight the New Drug, and it deals with things like human trafficking and exploitation within the adult entertainment industry. There is that organization out there that does some very, very good work.
Mm-hmm.
But I wanted to mention also, in the whole thing with Evan Rachel Wood and Marilyn Manson. I know I wasn't there. I don't know these people. I don't know what happened, but I do know that I watched her documentary, and how one-sided that may or may not be. I don't know. I just remember hearing her brother talking about one story when they were little. Apparently, the parents would get into these just blowout arguments, and he said he would find little Evan would just get away from it, and she'd be in some back room, or she'd be off somewhere play acting, just creating some world of her own, some make-believe world of her own that she'd be all involved in, that she could escape from while her parents were having these nuclear meltdown arguments. And that's apparently how she was first, introduced into acting, about how, wow, you'd be really good at this.
Mm-hmm.
She arrived at that from trying to escape from her chaotic home life. And to what degree that has followed her through her progression in life, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But I know that's where it started. And it just, I think, I think you get into very, very dangerous territory when people start to blur the line between their character and who they are in life.
Mm-hmm.
And I think not just in acting, but when people get into these positions of power to where they are responsible for people's livelihoods and fulfilling their dreams of being a big star and all that sort of thing, and it becomes very manipulative. And that's not just kids; that can happen to anyone. And you got to protect yourself. And I once upon a time, I did some work for a rape crisis center, and you I remember holding the hand of a young woman, she's 20 years old, um, who had been raped by a cousin less than 24 hours prior to this. And I was holding her, and there's a particular way you do this that that preserves dignity and modesty and respectfulness and all that. But I held her hand while they were, in quotes, administering the rape kit to collect DNA evidence, unquote. Yeah, it's as graphic as you want to imagine. And I'm holding this human being's hand. I was never the same after that. I mean, I was never the same after that. And kind of when you, like, I know what I went through. To actually be sitting there holding this person's hand while going through all of that, you get a perspective out there. I mean, there's some great people out there, there's some wonderful people out there, but there's some people who have turned into real monsters. And you've got to protect yourself. I mean, the old saying, and I really believe this: hurt people hurt people. And I mean, I can think of someone in particular when I was growing up whose father was just an absolute dirtbag. Actually, now I think about it, two other young men that when I was growing up, their fathers were absolute dirtbags. Their fathers were just scum, and they inflicted and perpetrated on their sons the worst things you can imagine in a situation like that. It happened to these kids. What happened to them? They started doing the same thing as they got older. And it just spiraled. It just kept snowballing down a hill. And at some point or other, it's got to stop.
And there's got to be the counseling to.
But what is going to make it stop? What level of tragedy and horror have to come down before it stops?
And I mean, and I think for Drake Bell, you know, when he got caught sending inappropriate pictures to a younger person, and then the DUIs and the things like that, and then he stepped back and went, okay, I really need to take inventory and I need to figure things out. And now he's on a much stronger path. I think him being able to speak his truth about what happened with Brian Peck helped him heal. So I think that's really important. You know, what I'd like to leave you with from this episode, because this is not an easy one to talk about. This is a rough one. It's not an easy one, I'm sure, to listen to. It was not easy for me to watch all 4 episodes. And, you know, again, as I said, the first one I made the mistake of watching at night. And then after that, it's like I cannot watch it because I just get so angry. But, you know, if you are somebody and your child seems to show an affinity for acting, get them into a summer camp, a theater camp or something like that. That's fun, where there's not the pressure to go on auditions and things like that, and really let them dip their toe in that way. And if they still want to do it after they've done the summer camp and they're still interested and they want to take drama classes in school and stuff like that, that's great. Nobody's going to get the standard rich and famous contract right out of the gate, just to be clear about that. And then for your own self-preservation, if you are in a situation and someone is coming in and they are trying to make it out like they have got, there's a big difference between somebody just trying to be helpful and someone going over that line of demarcation and saying, I could take care of all your problems. And then it becomes controlling, and then they want to control the finances. Then they want to start telling you that people that you've known for years don't have their best interest in heart. But, you know, I've only known you for 3 months and I can see what's wrong in your life. Those are all flag signs. And if you're seeing that, or you're seeing that in somebody that you know, try to get them some help, or, just for yourself, step back and go, why don't you want me talking to my mom or my brothers or my sisters or whatever? Because, those are the people that have loved me and supported me for a long time, but now you're coming in and telling me that that's all wrong. Get into some counseling away from that, just depending what your family situation is. But I think ultimately, when you have people coming into a situation insisting that they know what's best for you, even though they don't, again, like the, Brian Peck taking over a lot of that and driving wedges in families. Those are the things just to keep in mind. And, and I hope that this has been helpful, but I also want to feel like, if you've gone through something like this, you're not alone. And you're so not alone. I will give you a resource if you do want to learn kids self-defense. There is a group here in Atlanta called Revved Up Kids, and that's what they do. They actually do self-defense classes for kids. They do classes on how to spot predators, and it's classes for the kids and the adults, so you can kind of get both. And I think that's really important. One of the good stories from that was a young lady who had taken that class when she was in middle school. When she got into college, was in a situation probably not a whole lot different than what I was in, but she managed to fight off her attacker and get away and be able to do that. So there can be success and wonderful stories and healing from that. And, we will, in the show notes, also give you some places, if you do want to reach out and get some help, we can put some of those resources in as well. But guys, again, thank you. Again, this was not an easy episode to talk about, both from the experience of Quiet on the Set and then our own personal experience. But if you are somebody who has been a victim of sexual abuse or sexual assault, please know that you're not alone, and it wasn't you. You didn't do anything to cause it to happen.
On that note.
On that note, we love you, we support you, and again, take care of yourselves.
Take care of each other.
Yep. Until next time.
Be well, everybody.
We appreciate you guys tuning in, and keep in mind that you can catch us on our social media, Creative Actors Lab on Instagram and Facebook, and by the same name on YouTube. And for more on what we do, you can go to our website,
creativeactorslab.com, all one word. Thank you for listening. Stay curious, make art, not war. Much love until next time.